Welcome on in, guys. Tobin here with you, and thanks for checking out the channel. Hope you're doing fantastic out there. If you guys could subscribe, that'd be great, and appreciate you stopping by the channel. I saw an article from the great Barry Jackson in the Miami Herald today that got some comments from a former Miami Heat head coach, Stan Van Gundy. Beloved, I think, amongst the Heat organization. Always feels like he's hobnobbing when he comes here doing the broadcast. But Stan Van Gundy, pretty blunt in his assessment of the Miami Heat. We've been getting a lot of people's preseason predictions. We were talking a little bit yesterday about Tim Legler thinking the Heat are on the verge of being uninteresting. And Stan Van Gundy, he is also not very impressed by the state of the Miami Heat roster. And this is what he had to say. He said, quote, "I really don't understand what's going on there. They're really a win-now team, which I respect. They haven't put a roster out there that has a chance. I think, okay. They haven't, I'm going to say he's meant given in. I think he meant given in. 3, 2, 1. Here's the quote from Stan Van Gundy. Quote, "I really don't understand what's going on there. They're really a win-now team, which I respect. They haven't given in. They put a roster around that has a chance. I think they got lulled into a false sense of security by the run to the finals 2 years ago. And it was a great run, but they didn't have a great team, and they didn't have a great year. That's not a very good roster. To me, it's a play-in roster again." He goes on to say, "Obviously, if Jimmy will be able to play 70 games, maybe it's a little different. If you compare them to top 3 teams, Boston, New York, and Philadelphia, they're not even in the ballpark roster-wise. I don't think their roster is as good as Indiana, Orlando, or Cleveland. No, their roster just doesn't stack up. They seem like a team, to me, that has been relying on Eric Spoelstra to work miracles. You can only do so much. They can make a deal in season, of course, but at that point, it would be foolish to say they're a contender." So there you go. Stan Van Gundy, of course, big-time mentor to Eric Spoelstra. I think Eric Spoelstra has said that Stan is really the guy that said he could be a head coach and has a lot of respect there for what he has done. I've heard him make similar type of claims on the Le Batard show. Everybody enjoys Stan's appearances on Le Batard. And I think Stan Van Gundy is a good broadcaster for the most part. I do enjoy when he does games. I think he's probably one of the best guys out there doing it. And for whatever reason, he does seem to be more blunt on the Miami Heat than a lot of pundits. I think a lot of pundits are dismissive of the Miami Heat, and I feel like Stan actually has gone pretty hard in the paint of like, nah, not good enough. And I can't really say he's been, super wrong. I remember he went like hard in the paint on Justice Winslow a couple of years ago, and yeah, he ended up being right on that one with where the team was at. But this is the thing that I keep coming back to this with this comparison of this Miami Heat team, because yes, if Jimmy Butler does play more games, it's going to equal a better situation for the Miami Heat, who did have to deal with a lot of adversity from injuries last year. And this is going to be similar to what I said with the Tim Legler thing. It's like I'm struggling as a person who looks at the Eastern Conference and looking at any other team other than the Celtics and really saying they are head and shoulders. They're on a next tier from anybody else. Like, people are going to keep doing this with the Philadelphia 76ers because they added Paul George, and you act like it's not going to be weird and there's not going to be a weird fit. And you think, oh, guard, wing, big, it's going to fit all together and it's going to be this purposeful thing. But Paul George has been on a Clippers team that everybody kept going in the Western Conference and kept saying was going to be this true contender and was going to be something and was going to turn out, and they just never did. They never did. I mean, the guy really hasn't been an elite difference maker on a team. Like, maybe there were shades of that with Oklahoma City, with getting some like MVP buzz, but like really hasn't carried that team and been that kind of a difference maker since he was battling the LeBron James Miami Heat on the Indiana Pacers. So I just feel like Philadelphia is getting crowned too much. I think I've made that point. I'll give New York, I look at their roster and I'm like, it's intriguing. There's flaws, but they obviously made the flashiest moves between Bridges and Karl Anthony Towns and getting OG Anunoby back, even though he does also always get hurt. They're obviously the most intriguing other team in the Eastern Conference. I think they can get that nod. To me, giving it to Philadelphia is just, you're just setting yourself up for disappointment again. And why they always get the benefit of the doubt around Joel Embiid and the Miami Heat don't with Jimmy Butler is just forever going to be a strange thing to me. It just is. Because Joel Embiid's arguably his best team in the playoffs was led by Jimmy Butler. He lost Jimmy Butler, and he's never been where Jimmy Butler has been since Jimmy Butler left him. So I'm just never going to get that. Regular season-wise, sure, they've had seasons that have been nice, and he has put up MVP seasons, and he is awesome. From a talent standpoint, they're probably going to be very careful with him from a minute standpoint this year, which will be interesting. They get Caleb Martin on their team, which we all love Caleb around here, and on that playoff run that Stan was talking about, I don't know if he's looking at the loss of Caleb Martin and being like, well, how are they going to make that up? And all respect to Caleb Martin. I think Caleb Martin is a super talented player, and I liked his time with the Miami Heat. I don't want to dismiss the likes of him and Max Strus and Gabe Vincent, but I think the thing that gets overlooked by other pundits when it comes to the Miami Heat is one of the best things that they do is go find talent to go fix those guys. That's, like when Duncan Robinson was struggling and Max Strus stepped in, like that doesn't come from nowhere. Their draft picks have been very on point, other than Precious Achiuwa, who, is still playing the league, but, we're, going to be horrified by Tyrese Maxey for years because he was taken right after Precious. So the other thing with Stan, he's definitely been one of the more critical people about Jimmy Butler's availability in past years. I believe, hearing him on Le Batard, he has said things like, I don't understand why Anthony Davis gets crushed and Jimmy Butler doesn't, with the amount of games that he misses. And, he says this idea of people having this idea that Jimmy Butler's going to play 70 games this year. I've been saying to anybody who's at, like, I don't expect Jimmy Butler to play 70 games this year. I don't. I'm not looking at Jimmy and thinking that that's a realistic thing because I haven't seen it. He hasn't played 70 games, I think, since the Chicago Bulls days. So to sit here and put this number that you must be at would seem a little bit crazy, just knowing about how he plays, usually how his seasons goes, the bumps, the bruises that he goes with, hearing him on Starting Five on how he likes to have himself fully all the way back. Now, will that change at all because of what Pat Riley said? Hard to determine. You're not quite sure on where that goes, and certainly 60 games is probably shy of where you want to be. Like, it would be, I think the ideal place would be, hey, could he be award eligible and be at 65? Man, I think if the Heat could get to that, that would be tremendous. The Heat did have some of these issues with D. Wade where, the last year before he left for Chicago, Pat had a lot of these call-outs and had a lot of these thoughts with D. Wade. And then that 2016 season, he played 74 games. That was around the age of what Jimmy is. It was when he was 34, and then he, of course, goes to Chicago because of the contract standoff. This is another topic for another day. But my bigger point is Stan has been very critical on Jimmy Butler. But I just think that he gets overlooked as the difference that he does make to the team, where other stars are just given that benefit because they're there and they're going to be more healthy, and he's not. As far as the roster is concerned from this year to last year, I don't know, man. Like, I go to last year, right? And I see the opening night roster for the Miami Heat and what they brought to the table, a finals team that they brought to the table last year. And I just like this roster better. You know, I like this than running it back with, I think there were a lot of questions about running it back Kyle Lowry, going to run it back with Kyle Lowry, going to run it, you know, Kevin Love's going to be in the starting lineup last year, and that, like, your starting lineup last year had Lowry, Love. That was an old roster. I do think there's a lot of fun dynamics with this team and what they can bring to the table with Nico and with Terry Rozier next to Tyler and with Jimmy and Bam. I think Spo said it well, where he's like, you know, I think Jimmy and Bam can adjust to everybody else, no matter what, and that backcourt, he's intrigued by it. I think there is definitely going to be a conscious effort for the Miami Heat to score the basketball better. And then you go back into the Heat's rotation from last year. You have Duncan, you have Jaime that are going to come off the bench. Kevin's now going to come off the bench. You know, and then that Caleb Martin spot's going to essentially be, I would guess, Haywood Highsmith. Like, I'm looking at the opening night minutes last year, and they played 10 guys, and the second unit was Duncan, Caleb Martin, Thomas Bryant, Drew Smith, Jaime Jaquez. So Jaime, Duncan Robinson are back. Kevin Love's on the bench now with Nico in the starting lineup. Haywood Highsmith for Caleb Martin, and then Alec Burks essentially would be in that guard spot. That's not even considering, you know, what you could get with the rookies, which I think everybody's really excited about, these Heat rookies and what they can bring to the table. Those, I think, are going to be on the days where somebody is banged up and they need somebody to step up. There's more talk about what that role is, but I definitely think that's a better roster than what they had at the start of last season. And just from the outside looking in, like, you were just, you know, the confidence, you know, when he says that they got lulled into it, I definitely agree with that. I think that even with everything Jimmy Butler dealt with last year, I think there was an element of Jimmy Butler that thought the regular season, because of what they did not matter at all. And they could flip the switch. And it's tough to have the rest of the locker room buy into it when your star thinks that. I think that mentality is going to be different this year. So I don't think that the talent changes too much, but I think the talent is still good enough with a mentality shift of the importance of the regular season and what they're going to try and bring together, that the results can be a lot better. But, you know, when you say that they're not in the class of these other teams, like you say, you know, if you compare them to the top three teams, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, they're not even in the ballpark. I will give you Boston. I keep saying I will give you Boston. I'm not going to give you New York, and I'm not going to give you Philadelphia. I'm not. And I will, if you say Indiana, I respect Indiana. I think Indiana is the most slept on team in the East. But to say they're not in the ballpark, I'm not ready to go there. Cleveland, Orlando, nope, sorry. Not ready to go there yet. Milwaukee, even with having the Greek Freak, like, I'm not ready to go there and say that they're not in the ballpark. They're in ballparks. I don't know what section of the ballpark, but you can't say that they're not in the ballpark. Like, maybe you think they're in the outfield and one of the and Cleveland has dugout seats and you're in the bullpen and Orlando's behind home plate. But you cannot say that Philadelphia. You could say that they have first base seats. And, you may be in the out, but you can't say you're not in the ballpark. I'm not sitting here watching it on a Jumbotron. I think that's a little strong from Stan Van Gundy. Also in the article, Reggie Miller told reporters, he said, after TNT analyst Reggie Miller said he's not sure if the Heat is a top 6 team in the East, Van Gundy said Miami isn't, and added, if we go back 2 years to the Heat and Denver Nuggets finals, both teams have done nothing but lose talent over the last 2 off seasons. Neither one of them has done anything to make their teams better. And their talent level dropped from last year to when they had the finals team. And again, like, I'll hear you out on this. I get the argument about it, but here's the other thing. you go back to 2022 and you go to the finals team, all right? And you lose Max Strus and you lose Gabe Vincent and you lose and you lose Caleb Martin. Okay, I get it. You've lost those guys, you've lost those role players. I would argue Miami, the reason that you really don't believe in Denver and you don't believe in Miami is for Denver, a lot of your questioning is Jamal Murray the same guy? Because Jamal Murray, has that body been through too much? Can that guy really be? Because Jamal Murray, hit every big shot that just shut up every Heat run in that finals series. He was a killer. Yeah, they've lost the likes of Caldwell Pope and Bruce Brown, and those things are important. But, the real thing is with this Heat team, you look back on it and you lose Strus and Vincent. You can't tell me having Terry Rozier and Duncan at what he is compared to Max Strus or having Tyler Hero. You can't tell me, hey, we lost Gabe Vincent and Max Strus out of that starting lineup and Kevin Love. But, the three guys that the Heat have now with Terry, Tyler, and Kevin Love, I don't think it's smart to say that that's a huge talent drop-off. The bench, with Duncan, Haywood Highsmith, they're both here. The other guys in the bench rotation that year were Caleb Martin, who did not have a good finals. He was incredible in that postseason. But, man, if you told the Sixers today you could have Jaime Jaquez or you could have Caleb Martin, and I guess you got to consider contracts on that too. One's on a rookie deal. I'm taking Jaime, dude. The center was Cody Zeller. He did not play. I'm not even counting. You shouldn't even read him, to be honest with you. And then, the backup guard spot with Kyle Lowry, that had kind of just run its course. I don't think anybody would take the Heat super serious. Is anybody taking Philadelphia super serious because they still have Kyle Lowry? I don't know. So I'm not surprised to read this from Stan Van Gundy. He is pretty blunt with the Heat. And I'm not really mad about his take, but I don't agree with the concept that the Heat are far off the rest of the East yet. Not ready to do that yet. I'm going to give the Heat this because of Spo, and I don't think Spo's working miracles. Last year he had to work miracles because, man, 38 starting lineups, that's friggin' ridiculous. That's half your games. That's stupid what he had to go through. But I think you look at this roster the way it's constructed and what he's trying to bring to the table, I think even he is not looking at this as, I have to work miracles to make this happen. I think that if he has, I think what he has is in the ballpark of those other 2 through 6, 7, 8, 9 teams in the Eastern Conference. They are definitely in the ballpark of that. They got to make leaps to go with Boston for sure. I mean, I'm not here to put the Heat there yet. They have a lot of proving to do to show that they can be taken seriously when it all comes down to brass tacks for a winner-take-all series. But I think the rest of the East does too. I think New York has to still prove that. They've made their moves. And I think that's why it's they've made their moves from the outside, so it's obvious they're better equipped to beat Boston than an improved internal Miami team because it just looks less obvious. You're just nah, they can't do it anymore. We'll see. Stan doesn't think so.